Hello and welcome to The Conversation. Hey, this is the eGathering podcast, also known as The Conversation, where this fella, Rick Coop, and I, Todd Brown, sit and have a conversation. These conversations are about our religion, to be just straight up. They're about our religion, about the Christian religion, and we don't want this to be some deep esoteric thing. We just want to have a conversation and invite you to be a part of it.
Just talk.
Yeah. If something we say jumps out to you, hey, put something in the comments. We'd love an encouraging comment. We'd love to hear from you if you have a different opinion. And we get an awful lot of comments that seldom have anything to do with the podcast, so we'd sure love to hear what you guys have to say. This week, we're continuing on talking about parables, and we will be for several weeks. And this week's parable is the Good Samaritan. But we talked the first podcast, and I would invite you to go back and check that out in this series about parables. Why parables?
Yeah.
But just kind of help refresh why
stories
why
that would make
about
us think.
Yeah. Things that make you go.
Yeah. Sometimes we really show our age.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, let alone the physical, what can be seen with the eyes.
Yes. Arsenio Hall. Doesn't everybody watch it?
Yeah. But the parables were stories that we discussed that would make you think, make you dig deeper, make you understand. They were the ones that would separate the people who were there to really understand versus the person who was just there as a observer, a fan, didn't really care, just kind of wanted to be a part of the crowd. So because Jesus did say that, I speak these because there are some who will see. They have eyes to see but don't see, ears to hear but don't hear. But there were the ones also who were there who would dig deeper, who would be drawn in by the story and want to know more, and would discuss it when they got home.
Yeah. The parables we talked about is a shift from a rule-based, do this because I said so, method, which had been what they had come to by that point, back to, hey, think about this.
Yeah.
Let me help you have a deeper understanding of what's going on. And then people have a tendency to follow better if they understand why, right?
We remember stories better than we remember lectures.
Right, absolutely. So this week we're talking about the Good Samaritan. Last week we talked about the prodigal son, and this week we're talking about the Good Samaritan. And like the prodigal son, this is thick as a brick. There's just so much here to get from this story.
So we'll be discussing this for the next 17 days.
Yes.
It'll be a 17-day long episode.
17 parts.
Yeah.
No, like last time, I think we have to start with just reading the parable to understand what's going on. So, to preface, Jesus. So many people get frustrated with the Pharisees and with the teachers of the law and these different people who would go and deal with Jesus, and were at things when Jesus would be speaking, and then they always had some question. And I think we pick on them. But it's fair to understand that Jesus answered questions with questions. This is how they learned. If you want to understand something, if you want to teach somebody something, I think it's always best to start with a question.
Let's not forget that there were the Pharisees who were trying to trick him and trap him. There were Pharisees like Nicodemus who wanted to know.
Who were who became followers and lovers of Jesus.
Yeah.
So they always asked each other's questions. They did it to each other. They weren't just picking on him, and this is the way they rolled back then. You knew somebody understood something if when you asked them a question, they asked you one back.
Pertinent to what was being said.
If you guys can go back and forth, then we're going to dig deeper.
And I'm sorry, but I think about, unlike what we sometimes deal with, where there's a question that has nothing to do with what we said.
And they weren't watching the podcast. Right. They don't understand, and they're just trying to be mean.
Yeah.
And so we get that.
Sorry.
And there was some of that too, right?
Yeah.
But that's what's happening is when we approach this, Jesus has reached one of those points where he's said some things and done some things, and now he's getting asked questions.
Yes.
Okay, let's take that deeper, teacher. And so here's what happens. Luke 10, 25 through 37.
Yes.
All right. And it starts with, on one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do? What must I do to inherit eternal life? What is written in the law? He replied. What do you read? How do you read it? See, here's Jesus answering a question with a question. What's in the law? How do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this, and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place where he saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, and poured on oil and wine. When he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said. When I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell to the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. Jesus told him, go and do likewise.
Mouthful.
Thick as a brick.
Yep. There are so many things to this.
Yeah.
The last words, go and do likewise. One of the things I would be having, if I would have heard this, just go and do likewise. What do you want me to do? Just care for people.
Yeah.
But there's again, as I talked about in last week's podcast, there are characters to the story who each represent something that Jesus is trying. There's a deeper meaning to who they are and their parts in this story, and Jesus is and you know, the road itself, the Jericho road itself is a part
character
of this story. And there's something I want to talk about with the Jericho road here in a little bit. But first of all, the man who was attacked. Here's this guy walking on this road. From everything that I've gathered, it was like a 15 to 17 mile road between Jerusalem and Jericho, and it was a dangerous road. And he's walking this road just trying to get from one place to another, and he gets attacked. I found it was interesting. I did a little history on the Jericho road, and it said that until the 5th century, it was called the Red or Bloody Way, which I've never heard that, and I kind of thought it was interesting. And then up to the 19th century, people still had to pay money to the local chiefs to be able to walk on that road and not get attacked. Meaning you were paying a toll just to be able to walk on that road and not get messed with.
Give me some money, we'll protect you.
Yeah,
we'll protect you.
That reminds me of,
we can rob you before you go, or we can rob you on the road.
New York City, in the 5 Points area, where we'll protect your newspaper cart if you pay us money, and they were the ones that attacked it in the first place. Right. But he was robbed and stripped of his clothes, and he was beaten so badly that he was left for dead. I mean, these robbers pretty much, we beat him to death. He's gone now. And I was thinking, that's something that could happen to the attack is something that can happen to any one of us at any time. Walking the road of life, something happens, some attack happens. Could be an emotional attack, could be a physical attack, could be a mental attack, but we're all walking this journey of life. We're all dealing with things.
Yeah.
And out of the blue, something happens. And I'm going to stop there at that point, because what happens to us when something happens? Who are the people who will stop and help? And then, of course, he was bandaged and cared for by a stranger, and he was also allowed to recuperate. But I see that individual, that man who was attacked, as any one of us at any time by attack of any name.
Yeah, of any kind.
Yeah.
Financial attack, physical attack,
right?
Car wreck.
Exactly.
Somebody hurts us or our family or whatever is going on, and we're in distress and hurt. A self-attack.
Get bad news about a physical condition, or something happens.
Yeah. I think again we go back to why the parables.
Yeah.
And what's happening? There's so subtle little things. So the person who's asking Jesus this question is we don't get into this much. We talk about who Sadducees are and who Pharisees are and who the priests are, but teachers of the law is a weird one. We're like, what's teachers of the law? And why would they have been somebody who's asking this question? Teachers of the law are, I heard somebody say it once, put it this way, or scribes is another way of speaking about them. Scribes are likely Pharisees, but not all Pharisees are scribes.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. So a Pharisee is a sect of people who we all want to hate on, but frankly, we're closer, theologically speaking, to Jesus than anybody during his time. A lot of what Jesus spoke about were things they were already talking about. They were already a part of.
Which allowed him to speak in the temples.
Right. Too. But when they come and ask him, what does one have to do to get eternal life? This dude comes and asks, what do we have to do to get eternal life? The Pharisees were a sect of people who believed in the resurrection, and not everybody did. Not all the Jews believed that. And so these are people who are, hey, wait a minute, this rabbi dude seems to have some insight into the resurrection and eternal life. And so I want to figure this out. I want to get deeper with this. So we want to look at teachers of the law because they were ornery at times. And he ends up getting ornery. He's now, whoa, hey, teacher's talking to me, I got attention. Woohoo, I'm going to take my opportunity to get in a zinger.
Try to,
but initially,
stump him.
These teachers of the law, what's the difference between just a Pharisee and this type of Pharisee or this type of scribe is they were people who were legal experts. It sounds weird to us to go to a church lawyer, but it's kind of they're kind of a church lawyer. They would research and figure out and go through what was legal and what wasn't legal. So they would also prepare legal documents for you, church legal documents. They studied and deeply knew the law, so they could say, well, that minus this plus that equals you're good, or you can be in the temple this week, and here's why, and this is the way you deal with those things. So they were both very interested in what specifically, and so we want to make fun of them for being into the law, but this is what they've been taught since they were kids. Follow the law and you will be good. It's follow the law. Don't don't think about it. Don't try and grasp it.
Mm-hmm.
Follow the law. But these guys have also studied through to try and understand it deeply. So I kind of applaud them. But so when he asks, teacher, what does one have to do to gain eternal life? He and Jesus are on the same page.
Yeah.
And he's submitting to the idea that maybe Jesus has a better way of thinking of it than he's thought of it to this point. So where he gets in trouble is when he says, okay, but who's my neighbor?
Yeah. Well,
and what's he saying when he says that?
To me, it's at that point he's getting a little flippant there. You know, he's getting a little over the top.
Well, everybody's looking at me. I got the teacher's attention. We're having a conversation. Notice how I know enough to ask the question like this.
It's not just him and the teacher talking, which would have been totally accepted. It's like you just said. It's like him saying, well, now that let's see if I can stump you.
Yeah.
And
I take it a little different than stump you. I take it as he's saying, let's make sure that we're on the same page. We're talking about Jews, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about other Jews, right? We're not talking about everybody, because you're hanging around with a bunch of weirdos. You're hanging around with a bunch of prostitutes and cheaters and tax collectors and junk. Surely you don't mean them.
The verse that gets to me, though, is, but he wanted to justify himself. Yeah. And that's why I think he's trying to puff himself up a little bit here, and for me, that's why I think he's trying to stump Jesus a little bit here, so he can look around at the crowd and go, see, I know as much as he does.
I do. Yeah. And he told me I had the answer right, so instead of and again, it's the kid who walks up to him later, the rich boy who comes up to him and asks the same question, and he tells him. He asks him the same question. What do you see? And then he tells him what he sees, and then he's got to hit one more time. Yeah. I did all that stuff. Yeah, you did, but you're lacking one thing. Sell everything you have and follow me. Ooh.
Oh, wait a minute. What? I was with you, man.
I was with you all the way up to that point. Yeah. So he's poking Jesus, and I think, both to justify himself, but I also think to go make sure, hey, Jesus, I noticed that you're running around with these yucky people, but I want to make sure that we're on the same page. So Jesus takes that story, or takes that question that is pointed at yucky people, and then comes up with this parable. This parable
that kind of turns things around. So we talked about the man. The robbers who play a part in this. The robbers could be anything. There was a lot of things. I got all theological, and I thought, well, we know that the devil, Satan, is like a roaring lion seeking who he may devour. He comes to kill, to steal, and to destroy. And I was thinking, okay, so is it that? Well, yeah, I do think that. I do think that's a possibility. Is it another human being? Well, yeah, I do think that's a possibility. I was thinking, but it's not just Satan or another human being. If you hear rumbling in the background, we're not hungry. We're having a storm go through right now. But then I was thinking, it's also other things, and you mentioned financial issue, health issue. What is the robber? Well, the robber in this particular story could be anything that takes you away from maybe your relationship with the Lord, or your relationships with others, or your well-being, something that takes you away. I don't think it's maybe just these robbers, these physical people. I think it could be other things.
It's also a consequence of his choice to go down that road,
to go down the Jericho road,
because you mentioned and we noted that was not you were pretty much guaranteed you were going to get robbed.
There was going to be an incident.
Went down that road. There was going to be a problem. And then so some of it is, interestingly, this person is a victim to a degree of a consequence of a choice they made.
Of his actions to go that way.
Of a choice they made.
Yeah.
And Jesus doesn't say, leave him by the road. The action that he points out is someone cares for, without question, the person who suffered the consequences of not thoroughly their own action, but of their choice. They went down a road that could cause destruction, and they got destruction. And yet, this person who is his neighbor would care for him.
I like where you're going with that, Todd. Sometimes we, human beings, whether it's a Christian or non-Christian, just feel like, well, they made that choice, and they're going to have to just deal with it. Which is I'm just going to be bold enough to say that's kind of a jerk reaction.
It's hard, but I get it.
I do get it.
You've dealt with people with addiction a lot.
Yeah.
And I know that for a lot of families, they just have been hurt and robbed and stolen from and lied to and smashed so many times that they're like, kid, I'm out. I can't happen. I can't.
Let's go back to what we talked about last week with the prodigal son. Sometimes you have to let things cook.
You got to let them play out.
Yeah, the decisions that are made, they have to play out. The father, like you said last week, the father didn't keep sending money. The son had made his decision to go, and he was going to have to live with that. Yes, there are times when people make decisions, and they have to go. They have to take that road, that Jericho road, and because of those actions, things happen, problems occur. But when it comes down to the point that the person is no longer capable of helping themselves, when the injury has been so bad that they need our help, just to leave them on the roadside, even to walk on the other side of the road just to avoid it. I think this parable is telling us there does come a point where you have to jump in and help.
You help. God sorted out.
Exactly.
Somebody said, there's a young lady who grew up in this church who now is part of World Hunger. I don't know. Stephanie, I don't remember the name of the group you work with, but World Hunger. Anyway, her group feeds people all over the world. And she started out in a community food bank, working with people and giving food each week as they went through. And they had a saying that was, we feed the needy and the greedy.
I like that.
We're not here to do the math about whether they deserve help or not. We're here to help. You want help? Come, we'll help. This guy, the Samaritan, it doesn't say the Samaritan went, oh, that's a Jew, I'm out.
Yeah, can't do that.
It doesn't, it's just, maybe the Levite, maybe the priest look at him and go, dude shouldn't have come down this road, I'm out. I'm not getting in the middle of that. Because he got what he deserved, or he got what was possible as he was walking down the road. Interesting point. The priest and the Levite would have been left alone because of who they were going down that street. This dude was not.
Right.
So, interesting.
And depending on, like if they both thought, the Jew and the Levite thought this guy was truly dead, if they would have touched him, they would have been considered unclean.
Yeah, the priest and the Levite had to deal with being ceremonially unclean.
Yeah.
Oh my word. When the doctor starts saying I can't touch you because you have an injury, we got a problem.
Exactly.
A deeper problem.
Yeah.
But when we think about those people, they had strict rules that would have stopped them, but also they're worrying about themselves and what they have to deal with.
But Jesus deals with that in that, let's talk about what the law, the heart of the law, not the letter of the law. Yeah. When they walk by and they see this guy who's been beaten, and possibly dead, in their mind, they're thinking, if I touch him, I'm going to be ceremonially unclean. I'm not going to be able to do this thing or that thing. I'm going to have to go cleanse myself. I think it was, Todd, I don't remember exactly, but I think it was like 7 days they had to wash each day and do this. And if their clothes touched a dead body, then I think they had to burn the clothes, which meant that they had to get all this stuff all over again.
Yeah, I didn't.
And I'm thinking, so they're trying to follow the letter of the law, which is what they've been taught. Mm-hmm. And Jesus has, in these parables, tries to teach us, let's not focus so much on the letter of the law, and let's focus on the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
Did you even check to see if this guy was dead, or maybe he wasn't dead? Mm-hmm. But instead of even taking the time to stop and check, you're walking to the other side of the road.
So I think Jesus very specifically targets those two guys first because of who he's talking to. Mm-hmm. Because when the teacher of the law, when the scribe asks the question, I think, my opinion is, he's asking to puff up the religious right. He's trying to make it seem like, okay, but who is my neighbor? Well, my neighbor are Jews. My neighbor are my people. My neighbor, my people, the ones who live with me, my folks. These are my neighbor. And so I think Jesus very specifically points at the height of who the teacher of the law thinks are his neighbor. Mm-hmm. The priests and the Levites, the leaders in the church, the ones who bring song and lead worship, those ones who officiate over the cleansing ceremonies, the best of the best. I think Jesus very specifically targets. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying to you, buddy, is it isn't whether you're a Jew. It isn't what your family lineage is. It isn't whether or not you belong to this religion that you're a part of. I'm asking you, look at these three people, two at the highest point in your religion, and one
people that you despise.
People that you despise. So let's get into that a little bit.
Yeah.
Who are Samaritans?
Yeah, well, okay, so history lesson or just a Reader's Digest version?
We can hit it quick.
Yeah. History lesson. The Samaritans were people who the Jews had problems with for quite a while. They tried to build their own temple. There was a separation between the Jews and the Samaritans. Second Kings chapter 17 gives us a glimpse into why the Jews didn't like the Samaritans. The king of Assyria sent a priest from among the exiles to teach the Samaritans how to worship God after an attack, and they rejected it. They just kind of walked away with it. 2 Kings recounts how the worship of Yahweh was mixed with the worship of strange gods. So that was one of the reasons the Jews felt that the Samaritans were not purifying. The opposite of purifying were
yucky.
Yeah, they were throwing in stuff that shouldn't have been there.
Right. Yeah.
They were desecrating the teachings.
The holy places.
Yeah, the book of Ezra talks about that the Samaritans were rejected by the Jews when the Samaritans wanted to help the Jews build a temple. And then there's other bad blood that happened. There's the thing with the revolt.
Well, it goes way back.
It's way back.
When Solomon died, his son was made king.
Yeah.
And his son got way power hungry and started conscribing them for hard labor and making them work harder, and the more they bragged about it, the harder he pushed it.
Yeah.
And Solomon's son was very young, and his buddies were going, kick him harder. And so the kingdom splits, northern kingdom, southern kingdom. The problem is the southern kingdom holds the temple, and they're all supposed to come to the temple to worship at given times, and the southern kingdom's like, no. And so the northern kingdom starts making their own way on how to do things and
perverting,
and then they start, after the exile and then the coming back, they start interracially marrying, and like you said, mixing religions. And then the other thing is, when Nehemiah and Ezra come back and they're rebuilding the temple, the northern kingdom folks are coming down and getting in the way.
Yeah.
And telling on them and trying to cause them grief.
Right.
So they're half-breeds who don't do the religion right, and make up their own stuff, and they have their own way of doing things, and so they're worse than Gentiles.
Yeah. So there was bad blood, and there was bad blood, and then there was bad blood.
Yeah.
And then there was bad blood, and finally there was bad blood.
And to a group of people who are all into, you have to do it a certain way,
certain
for it to be right.
Certain laws.
It was all
got to do it. Yeah.
So.
And everything they did, they're doing wrong. What is this? You know, and like you said, they became worse than Gentiles.
And they weren't just. It wasn't just the Jews hated the Samaritans. The Samaritans hated them.
Oh yeah,
so it was about as bad as it gets.
Well,
so
the woman at the well says to Jesus, "You know, you're a Jew and you're talking to me.
Right?
You know, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, our Father gave us this well.
Leave it alone.
Yeah. What are you doing?" So Jesus specifically points out two of the best of who the teacher would have thought was his neighbor.
The neighbor.
And the one that he gives him is somebody who he is so repugnant to him, he can't possibly
Why
love
did
it.
you even say the word?
Yeah, Samaritan guy, the Samaritan guy does the thing.
Dude.
So again, it's Jesus saying, you can say all this stuff, you can do all the ceremonies, you can follow all the rules, but my question is, did you love your neighbor as yourself? You teacher, I love how he kind of traps him. He asked the teacher of the law to tell him what what the most important thing is to have eternal life. And then he says, and your guys aren't doing the thing that will gain them eternal life.
Do you find it interesting that at the end of this, when Jesus says to the teacher of the law, well, who do you think was this man's neighbor? He didn't answer
the Samaritan. I can't say the words.
Yeah. He answers,
don't make me say the word.
Well, the one who took care of him, you know.
Yeah, right.
You can't, he couldn't even say, well, it was the Samaritan. The one who took care of him was his neighbor. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of us, human beings, in that answer. There's a lot of us, you know. Okay, you know, how many times have we had a prayer and we felt the Lord was leading us one way, and it was like, okay, I'll do this, but I want you to go. He tugs on his heart and he says, I want you to go up to that man and I want you to give him $10, and beyond that, it's on me. What he does with the $10 is on me.
But he's going to buy booze.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you that.
I didn't say that.
I didn't involve you in that question.
Right.
Not a little bit.
Yeah. And so, you know, later on we might tell the story and we say, well, I gave some guy $10, you know. But we don't say who the guy was. We change it just enough so that we feel good about
we're okay.
Our answer. Yeah.
I think it's very straightforward in this. Jesus, I think it's so deep, so saying it's straightforward isn't fair. I think Jesus' point is a couple of things. One, you told me what it takes for eternal life. I agreed with you. Now you pushed me.
Yeah.
So here we go.
Yeah.
You told me what's the two things.
Yeah.
Love the Lord your God.
Yeah.
With all your stuff.
If you open the door,
love
let's
your neighbor
walk
as
through
yourself.
It. Yeah.
Now let's look at that as a practical example. So we're going to take station in life and we're going to remove that because that's what you think makes your neighbor.
Their neighbor, yes.
Whether they live next door to you or not.
Right.
Isn't that is not it.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Yeah.
I'm going to show you what that means. And then the priest doesn't love his neighbor. The Levite does not love his neighbor.
Yeah.
The Samaritan is loving his neighbor. You answered your question.
Yeah.
What's the answer? right?
I think that's a good lesson for today, too, Todd, in that we want to pick and choose who we feel that our neighbors are. Mm-hmm. And Jesus is saying here, your neighbors are anybody that you're around. Not just your nice, neat little tight circle here, but it's that neighbor across the road who just seems to always let his yard grow up and covered with weeds, and parks his broken down old truck in the front yard and never moves it, or plays the music that you don't agree with, that you don't like, or looks different than you, or says things different than you. That's your neighbor. Not just your nice, neat little circle where you can walk in and say, well, I helped somebody in the church today. Mm-hmm. But did you help the person who needed it? Right? I don't want to miss this. There's a thing that I read that Martin Luther King Jr. said. And I thought, this is a dig deeper thing. This is where Martin Luther King took this story about the Good Samaritan and made it and saw it in a deeper way. On the one hand, we're all called to play the Good Samaritan on life's roadside. We've established that. But that's only the initial act. And when I read that, I thought, okay. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One day we must come to see that the whole Jericho road needs to be transformed, so that men and women will not constantly be beaten and robbed as they make their way through the journey on life's highway. Mm-hmm. And I sat back in my chair. I did exactly what I'm doing now, and I went, wow. So he's talking about not only is our responsibility to change the life, to help assist in the life of the one who's been beaten, but it's our responsibility to change that road, that Jericho road, and make the Jericho road easier. And I think what Martin Luther King Jr. is saying here, what he saw in this scripture, is that yes, we have a responsibility to our neighbor, but we have this same responsibility to the whole world on a broader scope. If we're all doing this, then the Jericho road, the bloody way, the red way, becomes a road easier traveled, safer to travel.
If we keep going and picking up bodies off that road, and we don't fix the road, then we're not really seriously trying to help. So I mean, if we look at how many kids get killed in drive-by shootings, and we just keep going and bringing food to their moms or the people who got killed and helping with the funeral, we're not fixing the problem. There's going to be more moms. If we keep wow, that's a political thing, and I want to leave that alone. If we keep fixing the symptom and not fixing the disease, then we're not really invested. We're not really invested in what's going on. And I like when we look at the Samaritan, he doesn't just say that he patched him up on the side of the road and left.
No.
He picked him up and he took him to a hotel. He went in and stayed with him a little bit, kind of get him on his feet. And then he went to the innkeeper and said, I'm going to take care of whatever the bill is here. So do we go and feed the homeless? Do we go and take clothes to those who are hurting? Do we go and love on people in a moment? Yes. But do we take part of our, like I've said so many times, show me a man's wallet and show me his time and I will show you his God. If we're investing in, here it comes, I'll pick on me. I like to watch UFC fights. I don't pay for the pay-per-view, not because I'm holier than anybody, but if I paid $80 to watch a fight this month, and they gave $5 to the mission, what am I investing in?
Yeah.
What is my God? Have I invested in my neighbor long term? Have I Brianna's Hope? Did I give to Brianna's Hope and promote that group who's helping? If I go and take Narcan and give it to some kid who just passed out and is overdosed in my floor, that's level 1.
Right. It's well and good of us to change the life of an individual
in a moment.
To help change the life of an individual in a moment. It's better of us to help change the world.
Yeah. To your point, change the road. To Martin Luther King's point.
Yeah.
Okay, we got him. He's in a hotel. He's fine. He's working.
Yeah.
We're going to work that out. Great. Hope he does well. Hope he makes better choices. But what's up with that road?
Yeah.
They call it the red road for a reason.
Yeah.
That's the deeper. Yeah.
It is.
Got anything else?
No, other than that, guys, we just touched on it. There's a lot more to this story. There will be a lot more to the other parables that we go through. Yeah. But this is what we saw in the moment that we were in.
Yeah, go read it.
Yeah,
that's an idea.
And dig into it for yourself.
Read it.
Tell us what you saw.
Luke 10, 25 to 37.
Yeah.
Go figure out who the Samaritans were. Go figure out who these people were who was listening. That's what we hope to go through.
Yep.
Guys, if you're still with us, would you hit that like button? Hit the follow button. It helps us subscribe if you're on YouTube. We hope that you guys have a great rest of your day.
Bye-bye.